is a key pillar of BC's economy and indeed the fundamental source of capital in all modern market economies. But where are we going from here? Will prices continue to rise? Will the bubble ever pop? And will we still be talking about the affordability crisis in 20 years? Let's get into it. The World Expo held in Vancouver in 1986 is generally regarded as the modern turning point for the province and city. Prior to that, Vancouver was seen as a sleepy provincial backwater. Buffed up by Expo, almost overnight, we acquired a global profile as a world-class lifestyle city. Using 1986 as our baseline, we have experienced 3 real estate super cycles with accompanying characteristics. First, from 1986 to 2002, driven by a wealth of migration predominantly from Hong Kong and Taiwan and later mainland China. 2, from 2002 to 2016, driven by wealth migration from predominantly mainland China, but increasingly from students and workers from India. And 3, 2016 to the present day, driven mostly by students and workers from India, particularly in tech. Starting in 1986, Vancouver and BC began to capture global attention. This had some impact on the real estate market, but it was early days and the city, and by extension, the province, had yet to develop a reputation as a world-class residential destination. In fact, much of the growth this supercycle was fueled by negative sentiment or push factors in potentially unstable places like Hong Kong and Taiwan. Fear of change in the home region aligned with favorable Canadian immigration policies, pushing a wave of well-heeled immigrants from the dangerously volatile razzle-dazzle of Hong Kong and the more rustic anxiety of Taiwan to the boring stability of British Columbia. Throughout this period, there was little talk about Vancouver being a world-class city. On the contrary, many locals expressed widespread insecurity about our place in the world. This was the era when the moniker No Fun City was born, when Tourism Vancouver hired our own Sarah Daniels and a rainforest princess to convince David Duchovny that Vancouver wasn't that bad. And when we panicked, when Steve Francis openly pouted when he was drafted by the Vancouver Grizzlies. Today, we forget that BC wasn't always a top destination. Through the 90s, there was more talk about the brain drain, our best and brightest leaving BC, than about our world-class reputation. This began to change in 2002 with the emergence of certain pull factors, that is, reputational features that made us an attractive place to move to and invest in. It was in 2002, for example, that The Economist magazine, the self-appointed journalistic gold standard for the international jet set, for the first time ranked Vancouver as the world's most livable city, a title the city would hold for 8 consecutive years. This period was a golden era for BC, as the Economist ranking crystallized Vancouver's reputation as a place the globally mobile wanted to move or spend time in, a multicultural lifestyle city featuring a main course of good schools, a mild climate, safe streets, and direct flights to major cities throughout Europe and Asia, all garnished with a set of accommodating immigration policies. The narrative changed. We had acquired a range of pull factors. Rather than just a destination that people were pushed to, we became a destination that people were pulled by. Canadian immigration and citizenship status, adorned with a nice home in Vancouver, became status symbols for footloose business and leisure elites, especially nervous nouveau riche ones, who could take pride in telling their friends when they were asked why they have a place in Vancouver, telling them that they had a home in the world's most livable city. After all, it must be true. It said so in The Economist. This era was also marked by the narrative of wealth migration from China. Stories of students buying luxury homes, novice drivers in expensive cars, and criminals laundering wealth through casinos dominated our media. In addition, developers, investors, and speculators drove BC's economy, further driving demand. Regardless of where the demand was coming from, restrictive land use policies in BC prevented an adequate supply response to this additional demand, resulting in an explosion of prices. A characteristic of this era was the market growth in the high end, with prices trickling down from expensive homes and out from the core. In 2000, There were 10 homes sold in Greater Vancouver for over $3 million, with only one home selling for over $5 million at 5.2. By 2016, 1,960 homes sold for over $3 million, with 479 homes selling for over $5, and the most expensive selling for $31.1. Through this era, China was the #1 source country for permanent residents to BC, further cementing this narrative. However, in 2016, 3 things changed to begin a new era. Firstly, talent migration, predominantly from India, replaced wealth migration, which had been predominantly from China. 2, while real estate remained the biggest driver, technology emerged as the biggest growth engine. And 3, millennials, the biggest generation in history, began entering their prime household formation years. These changes meant that the real estate economy, rather than being driven from the luxury market and out, began with middle-class homes and in the suburbs. Then, the pandemic hit. At first, a common belief was that the real estate market would struggle. After all, if the narrative was that migration was the key driver of the housing market, a global lockdown would knock out the only leg holding up the stool. When the market accelerated through 2020 and 2021, a new narrative developed to begin to explain it. 1, government slashed interest rates to support the economy, making it easier for people to get mortgages. Secondly, in addition to lowering interest rates, governments pumped unheard of amounts of money into the economy. This, mixed with the fact that there is not so much money to spend on, means that asset prices, from real estate to the stock market, have been where people have been putting their excess savings. In the US, this has amounted to a savings rate of over $1 trillion. A conservative estimate in Canada shows that Canadians may have saved, through reduced spending and increased government support, an additional $100 billion through the pandemic. 3, work from home has created additional demand for space. We've all been surprised at how well we have adapted to the work from home phenomenon. Technology has allowed us to seamlessly transition to a hybrid model, with Zoom and Teams now ubiquitous in everyone's lives. Imagine if this pandemic had happened 10 years ago, before video technology had evolved to where it is now. Or 20 years ago, when we were still just starting to figure out the internet. We have been fortunate that this happened at a time when we could adapt quickly. Along with discovering that a lot more can be done away from the office, there have been demands for increased space at home. In the major centers, we were already suffering from a supply crunch. If everyone is now demanding even more square footage, that will only get worse. And while the jury is still out on whether the work from home phenomenon will persist, and I believe that the demise of offices is greatly exaggerated, even a small shift can make a big difference. The Canadian office market is worth $250 billion. If only 10% of this shifts from office to the home, that's an additional $25 billion in investment transferring from commercial to residential real estate. COVID may have just accelerated the trends that were developing in 2016. First, talent migration will accelerate to BC post-pandemic. Immigration levels have increased. In addition, Vancouver has been criticized in the past as being a resort town. But in a work-from-anywhere economy, even more people will choose to live in resort communities, irrespective of where they work. Further to that, the technology sector in BC is set to grow even faster. While work from anywhere will accelerate, there will still be an advantage to being in the same time zone as Seattle and San Francisco. In addition, Canada's more liberal immigration policies will encourage tech firms to relocate to BC to take advantage of a more global talent pool. So far, in 2021 alone, BC has produced 7 tech unicorns, or companies valued at over $1 billion. In addition, Amazon alone is set to occupy well over 1 million square feet of office space. Altogether, there are currently 15 office towers under construction and slated to be completed in downtown Vancouver by 2024. And the general rule is you need 6 square feet of housing for every square foot of office space, meaning we will need 90 more residential towers to support the workforce of these 15 office towers alone. Finally, millennials, the biggest generation in history, unable to travel and enjoy the trappings of youth, are settling down all at once. This year, the oldest millennials will turn 40, and will begin entering their prime household formation and home buying years. Unfortunately, there appears to be a new reality that their parents, the baby boomers, are likely to age in place rather than downsize and free up room for the next generation. This has been reinforced by the pandemic, which has convinced seniors that they should do everything to keep some outdoor space and avoid long-term care. If a set of parents who have 3 kids decide to age in place, that family will go from needing 1 house to shelter everyone to needing 4, all with no population growth. This last factor has the biggest implications for our industry. We know how culturally and economically impactful the baby boom generation was. With the millennials just entering their prime adult years, their impact will be just as forceful. And they've just started buying homes. Regardless of what narrative you subscribe to, it is clear that demand will continue to increase. Without a substantial increase in supply, it is likely that prices will continue to grow over the coming generation.